Hey everyone, and welcome to the Perfect Bite podcast, your fusion of food and entrepreneurship. You'll hear stories from chefs, restaurateurs, CPG brands, and more from the food and bev industry. All of them are at different points in their journeys, talking about their experiences and how they've cooked up something new. Let's dig in. Welcome back to the Perfect Bite podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Perkins. When I first moved to Columbus, I was curious if I'd find any local spots that were akin to my favorite haunts in Chicago. Special but relaxed and accessible with absolutely fantastic food. Lo and behold, there's a Columbus chef who's doing just that, building an empire that reflects good food, good values, and good times. He's the name on everybody's lips, and it isn't Roxy. Please welcome today's guest, Chef BJ Lieberman. Hi, BJ.
Hello. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for being here, and thanks for putting up with my little Chicago the Musical joke there.
It's all good. I actually didn't get it, but now that you say it, I'm like, oh yeah, Roxy. All right, got it.
Here's hoping other people get it, but if not, I'm here to just make myself laugh.
Most people are more cultured than me, so I think that they'll get it. So
I don't believe it. I am so happy to have you on here. I'm just so happy we met because truly in the last less than a year since I moved to Columbus, whenever I'd say, where's some great spots to eat or who should I know in food? Everyone just says, BJ Lieberman. So happy that we've been connected here.
that's so sweet. It's funny because inside of our little insular bubble, I just feel like nobody knows who we are. And we're just fighting every day with that attention economy. And it's so nice whenever we hear that people from outside of our little sphere know who we are, and it feels good. So thank you.
Of course. And especially when you're building something of your own, it always just feels like you're not far enough in enough time. It always feels like something more should be happening, but you're there and there's more to come, which is really exciting.
I was going to say, sometimes it feels like too much is happening.
Too much chaos here.
Yeah.
Well, I always love to start at the beginning here. Let's talk about when you first fell in love with food. What were your favorite foods as a kid? What was cooking and food like in your house growing up?
Yeah, neither of my parents are really cooks. My mom definitely tries, and my parents definitely have an appreciation for good food, but I would not call either of them chefs or anything close to it. But I grew up outside of Washington, D.C. in a really eclectic part of the country, and both my parents own their own businesses, so they weren't home a ton, especially not to cook. So we would eat out a lot when I was a kid. And I didn't realize that was a weird thing to grow up doing, but we would have, Turkish cuisine on Monday and sushi on Tuesday and Cantonese Chinese on Wednesday. And we just ate at all these amazing places growing up. So I didn't really realize what a big part of my life food was until I went to college in Charleston, South Carolina. And I'll never forget the first day we were there, I asked my roommate if he wanted to go get some sushi. He was like, sushi? Hell no, I'm not eating that. And I was like, oh, not everyone grew up like me. Okay. So being in Charleston, especially in the early 2000s, when that food scene was just starting to explode, it was kind of tough not to fall in love with it. It's a very romantic food city. So between my childhood of just loving all different kinds of cuisine and being willing to try anything, and then the love that's put into Southern food, I kind of was hooked pretty early.
That's incredible. And like you said, now Charleston really is such a foodie destination. And yeah. I'm sure there's amazing sushi that folks would say, yes, let's go get it right now. Very different than how I grew up in that sense where, again, Midwestern, like you said, parents did a great job feeding us and making sure we were fed, but it wasn't, haute cuisine at home. It was Chili's for birthday dinners and just really simple stuff. So even though you were like, this is different, you were very lucky in that sense that you were exposed at an early age to different cultures and their cuisines.
Yeah, I mean, it's another funny thing, growing up outside the Chesapeake, blue crab pickings are every summer for my entire life. Multiple times a year, we would get a bushel of crabs and just sit there for hours and pick. And when I was old enough, drink beer and stuff. And when I started dating, who's now my wife, she grew up in Columbus, and I took her home for a crab picking one time. And I just assumed that everybody knew how to do this. And she's looking at me like, what do I do with this? And I was like, oh, that's another cultural thing that I didn't know was a unique thing. So those are like the memories and the things that I grew up with that I think definitely shaped kind of a little bit of my culinary viewpoint today, is just being willing to try anything, appreciating everything. Like, that's peasant food. Catching crabs out of the bay and boiling them at home is like free food. So yeah, definitely one of my favorite things.
It's so funny you say peasant food because crab is considered like a luxury food when you go out to eat, and it's so special. Anything with seafood seems to be. And I'm sure that your wife was like, sweet corn shucking is a lot different than crab picking.
Yeah, that's definitely true.
And now you get to bring it together. So you go to college down in Charleston. What did you study while you were there? And what was that moment that you had that shift that you said food was for you and that you actually wanted to turn your career and your life into a culinary journey?
Well, the first 2 years I was there, unfortunately, I was studying going to the beach and not going to class. So I was politely asked not to return to the College of Charleston after my sophomore year. And my mom owned a graphic design firm, and I always really loved doing computer design art things. So I went to a technical college down there for graphic design. And at the same time, I was working in restaurants. That's what all college kids do down there to get by. And the restaurant group that I was working for lost their marketing director right when I was about to graduate with my associate's degree, and they offered me to come into the corporate office as their marketing director. So I left the restaurants, I went into the corporate office, and I got to deal with all the chefs of all the different restaurants in our restaurant group one-on-one weekly. And I really just fell in love with the way they thought about food. I was a sponge for that stuff because I had to design all the menus. So we'd be talking through like, this is seasonal now, this is going on. And like, I didn't know how to cook anything, but I was just sitting there being like, this sounds incredible. Like, I want to come to the restaurants and eat all this. And our catering operation for the entire restaurant group was in our corporate office, like across the parking lot. And by the time it was all said and done, after like 2 years, I was spending more time over in the catering kitchen than I was spending at my desk. So it was pretty obvious that it was time to go to culinary school at that time. So I am a late in life career changer, I guess. I went from marketing and graphic design to full on in the kitchen when I was about 25 years old.
I wouldn't even call that late.
Yeah, I guess late when I went to culinary school and everyone was 18 and I was 25, but you know.
I think like it's just so important to feel that moment when you know that something is going to change your life, and it doesn't matter what age you were. And it really makes so much sense about the venues and the restaurant group you have now, that you learned the behind the scenes, the business aspects of it, how to reach folks. It's why your branding's so incredible. And you ended up going to the very prestigious Culinary Institute of America, the other CIA, as we like to say. What was it like during that time? What did you learn, and how did it really help you put your own thumbprint on cuisine?
Yeah, as I described earlier, I was not the best student growing up, especially not when I first went to college. And I went to CIA knowing that this was going to be my career. And I challenged myself to get straight A's and to have a 100% attendance record, because those were the two things that I'd never done in my life. I always found reasons to miss class, or, B is good enough to pass, whatever. And that was my first thing going in, was I had a mission to prove to myself that I actually could buckle down and concentrate for 2 years straight on something. So at CIA, like most culinary schools, I think that you get out of it what you put into it. And I really wanted to get the most out of it. So I would stay after class and talk to my chef professors about extensions on what it is that they were teaching in class that day, or whatever it is, any opportunity that I had to do offsite events, I would go and cook them for free. I would go down to New York City and stage at restaurants on the weekends for, just for fun, just to learn and be a part of restaurants. So I really feel like I took the initiative to make the most out of that experience, mostly because I had already kind of like failed as a student before. And I think if I had gone to culinary school right out of high school, it would have been a disaster, just like College of Charleston was. So, I feel like that was a really good experience. But I do know a lot of people who are just as successful who didn't go to culinary school. So I think that it's one of those things that you can learn on the job, and you can learn certain things from culinary school, but it's not like you graduate culinary school and you're a chef. You are ground level just like anyone else, except now I have $100,000 in student debts that I need to somehow pay off with a cook's wage. And I think that that's probably the biggest drawback to culinary school is just being saddled with all that debt and not graduating as a doctor or a lawyer. You're a cook. And
Yeah.
it's tough to make ends meet. I mean, I've been doing this. I graduated 15 years ago now, and I'm still paying off my student loans. So yeah, it's no joke.
Yeah, I think this is so important to talk about. It's becoming a topic of conversation in the zeitgeist more. I mean, we'll get to what's just going on in the climate in general and the economy and just like preparing for everything because it's just so all over the place right now. But there is this shift from our generations and those before just saying, if you want to have any sort of life, you better go to a 4-year university and then you'll be great. And then we had moments like the 2008 economy crash and the recessions during that time. And these moments afterwards where we're realizing, you went to culinary school, that's $100,000. I went to a graduate school for a journalism degree. And again, it took a long time to pay these things off. This is me using my journalism skills these days, which is fine, but I am not a quote unquote journalist or editor anymore. And it's an interesting thing that we're teaching these next generations of if you have a passion, if you have certain skills, go and figure out how to do it. There are certain levels where, yes, having the background of education is important, but having just a degree, having just the piece of paper does not make someone successful. So I know it's tough, but you really have done the right things, which is I'm going to try this. I'm going to get a formal education as much as I can, and I'm going to stage. I'm going to make sure that you're getting out there and trying things. So that's my little aside, which is I don't know if there's really a right way to do things anymore.
No, and it's a pretty typical discussion that I'll have whenever I do a podcast or an interview with anyone outside of the industry is they want to know, like, do you recommend for a young cook to go to culinary school? And my answer is always, it depends. If you're somebody who needs the structure of understanding how the car works before you can drive the car, then I definitely recommend going to culinary school. If you're the type of person that can mimic an action and learn by solely doing, then honestly spend those 2 years just working in different kitchens and see different things and learn from mentors as much as you can. And you learn way more in the kitchen than you do at culinary school. But for me, like, before I could drive a stick shift car, I needed to like actually understand what was happening in the car. Just being like, press the clutch and put it in first gear didn't make sense to me. But when I understood what was happening, I'm like, all right, now I can drive the car. And that's kind of the same thing with cooking for me is I needed to understand, like, why does this happen? What is the science behind what's happening? You can't just tell me like blanch a vegetable and it's going to turn green. I need to understand what's happening with the chlorophyll and the this and that. So attacking food from a scientific standpoint has always been the way that I've thought about it, because it is a science, but it's also an art. So it's left brain and right brain stuff going on. And then skipping ahead to like being an owner and owning a business, then it's the numbers, it's the organizing, it's, a lot of things that honestly I'm not very good at, that you kind of get thrust into this situation of like, you need to wear many, many, many hats and understand a lot of different stuff that doesn't quite come naturally to me or to probably most people.
Yeah. And you said it just so succinctly, which is a lot of people earn their MBAs on the job if they decide to be an entrepreneur. And they decide to be an owner of something. Again, sometimes folks are like, yeah, I'm interested in this area. I want to do something on my own. It would really help me if I went and got my MBA. I'm like you. I was one of those folks who was like, I'll figure this out. I'll talk to mentors. I'll go through different programs, things like that. But that's where we're learning it.
Yeah. And that's the hardest thing, is to find a mentor who's willing to teach you the hard fought lessons, like teaching you how to cook something, fine, whatever. Teaching you how to organize your station, fine, whatever. That's what chefs should do. Teaching you how to read a P&L, teaching you what a construction budget looks like, how to raise money, how to surround yourself with the right people, to recognize in yourself where your deficiencies are and how to fill those spots with other people who are better at those things than you are. And that was a big mode change for me when I realized that hiring at this level isn't just hiring cooks and stuff. Like, I need to hire people who fill in the blanks of what I am lacking, and taking a deep look at myself and being like, what do I suck at? Because that's what I need to surround myself with, was a pretty fun and interesting exercise to do.
Yeah, it's almost like your biggest job as a leader is I can't do everything. Time to delegate. And who can I surround myself with who is better at that one thing? You don't suck at anything.
Beg to differ. I think my wife would too. So.
Tell me, where did you stage? Where were some of those fun spots that you have memories about?
I staged at a lot of restaurants in New York. The best one, my favorite one, was a place called The New French that was in the West Village. And it was a really small restaurant. I think it had about 8 tables. And it was 2 chefs in the kitchen, this guy named Di and a guy named William that I actually knew from Charleston. And William set me up with the stage. And it was literally just the 3 of us in the kitchen. It was like a 6-burner, a deep fryer, and then a little cold salad station. And getting to work with those guys one-on-one was the best teaching opportunity I could ever do. I'd never really worked service in a restaurant before, and it was small enough that they could explain to me exactly what to do, but it was busy enough and it was a small enough kitchen that when we got busy, like we were freaking busy. So that was a really cool opportunity. And I staged there probably about 10 to 12 different times over the course of time. I staged at 2 Michelin star restaurants, one of which I will not disclose the name of because I did not have a good time, but I got some really good stories out of it. I staged at 11 Madison Park, which was an incredible opportunity, and Gramercy Tavern, which was an incredible opportunity. So, if you're not looking for a job and you just go to a chef and you're like, hey, I just want to hang out for a day, like I'll pick parsley for you. I just want to be in your kitchen and see stuff. Yeah. At least at that time in the early 2000s, people were pretty open to letting you come into their kitchen and just observe. So I don't know. I really love New York City, and getting to be kind of like in the underbelly of the food scene of it for a period of time was just such a life-altering experience for me.
Yeah. And it really gives you the skills and that high quality of food that, especially, let's call it 15, 20 years ago, we just weren't seeing in smaller markets outside of New York. Everyone's like, just go to New York. That's where the best restaurants are. Then Chicago finally started to kick its butt, I will say, in terms of James Beard Awards are now held there. And then it wasn't just, let's say, coastal. It wasn't just New York, and it wasn't just, California. It was, you can find amazing food anywhere. It's just making sure that folks have the resources and the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And gosh, I could go a lot of different ways with this conversation. But I do feel like there was kind of like a Food Network revolution that was both positive and negative for the food industry. But I think on the positive side, diners really started to look at chefs as like a little bit of a celebrity thing, which if you had any kind of notoriety, people would travel to come and see you. And I always found it to be interesting because I've worked in a lot of those restaurants that have gained notoriety, and it just feels very random how it happens. And it's the Kingmaker events like Bon Appetit, GQ, like getting on those like big lists, New York Times, stuff like that. It changes the restaurant sometimes forever in positive ways and also in negative ways. And I've been on both sides of that event. So it's really interesting just to kind of see how food and chefs and restaurants have been elevated to kind of this really weird cult status in America. At the end of the day, I think that it's ultimately good for the restaurant industry. But what I think is bad about it is that if you don't gain or garnish this like national recognition, it's almost like you're failing in some way. Like you said, with Michelin star restaurants, it's a little bit arbitrary and it's a little bit political. And I know a lot of Michelin star restaurants in Washington, D.C., and I was just in Mexico City and we ate at some like Michelin recognized, but not Michelin star restaurants. And a lot of them, I'm like, how does this not have a star? Like, how is this just Michelin recognized? And then there's restaurants in D.C. that I'm like, compare the two. I don't know. But it's a weird world that we're living in now where like you and I have had these conversations offline, but like the attention economy is just weird. How you sell yourself on social media, just like all the things that come along with this of what a celebrity chef like should be or whatever. And I'm not saying that I'm that at all, which I'm not. I hate that term, but it is something that kind of like floats through the industry. That's just like a really interesting thing. It's like, can I just cook good food and be happy with my team? Like, is that enough for people? I don't know.
You just said a lot. Like, it's true. I mean, you're this combination of hats in a single person as a chef and or restaurateur. You're a chef, You're a scientist, you're an artist, you're a business owner, you're customer service, you're all these things. And especially, again, given the rise of social media and the fact that a lot of folks who are in the younger generations are wanting to get some notoriety and get out there on, say, TikTok and Instagram reels with their food. But like you said, you also got to put in the work. You can't just make it at home by yourself and you're just the one eating your food and sharing the recipe. You do have to get out there and do some really hard things. And that's where I think there needs to be just that middle ground, that balance and understanding. It's not one or the other. And it's tough when you said too, you're like, I just want to be behind the scenes. I just want to cook. Why do I have to do an interview? Why do I have to make videos? But that's marketing, baby. We got to do it.
Yeah. You know, I'm not great at that stuff because I'll never be the one to like put myself out there like that. Like I need other people to tell me like, hey, you're doing a video today. You're doing a podcast today. You're doing whatever it is today to put ourselves out there. Because to me, it's like, I don't know, if I was just left alone to my own devices, I'd just be hammering out emails and making sure our budgets are good and make sure that I'm communicating with the team, what's happening here, there, whatever. But our public facing part of ourselves is really important too. And it's a tough balance for me to strike because I'm fairly shy at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think there are very few people in this world, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, who say, camera time, great. Believe it or not, I like really struggle with this as well sometimes. Or the few times when I was a founder of a startup that folks were like, great, you're going to do a 5 a.m. segment on the local news. You're getting your makeup done at 3 a.m. and it's just 4 minutes. And folks said, you did great. And I'm like, I blacked out. I don't know what I said.
Yeah,
I'm on autopilot. Yeah.
Yeah, those segments, when they're like, yeah, you have a 4-minute segment, you're like, what am I going to do for 4 minutes? And then before you know it, they're like, we're wrapping. And I'm like, I didn't even get to say the thing that I came here to say. Yeah, I've done those before too. It's always really funny.
You're like reading the message on your hand and pen. You're like, oh, right. And.
Yeah. I mean, if you get me talking about my restaurants, I can talk for hours.
Because they were your first babies, which is so exciting. I want to chat into that. So let's talk about, speaking of Michelin stars, you were with Rose's Luxury and Little Pearl. They both earned stars. What was that era like that made you change essentially how you worked when you recognized, okay, whoa, I am part of a team that's at this level? And how did it inspire you then to say, I think it's time to go do something on my own, try something new?
Yeah, I mean, that was obviously an incredible time in my life filled with an unbridled amount of success that was really just wild to look back on in retrospect. But I'll never forget, we had no idea that the Michelin Guide was coming to Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. I'll never forget, I was having a 4th of July party at my house that was like a block away from the restaurant. And the restaurant owner, Aaron, who's still a dear friend of mine, was over at the party. He was like, hey, can we go take a walk for a minute? I'm like, are you going to fire me in my own party? Like, what's going on? And he's like, no, I just need to tell you something, but I can't say it in front of everyone. I was like, okay. He's like, I just got a call from the Washington Post, and they're asking me for comment about the Michelin Guide coming to DC. And I was like, the Michelin Guide's not coming to DC. And he was like, apparently. And I was like, okay, well, that's great. I mean, there's no way we're getting a star. And he's like, you sure about that? I'm like, dude, we don't have tablecloths. We serve mismatched tableware. Like, we don't do any French cuisine. Like, why would the Michelin Guide give us a star? And then when it came out, we got a star. And I was just like, that's crazy. Like, we weren't trying. This wasn't a thing that we set up to be at any sort of certain level. It was a neighborhood restaurant that we were just cooking food that we stood behind, that we loved. And to get a star for doing something you love, like unprovoked, I guess I'm saying the wrong word, but it was just the most amazing feeling. It was kind of the same thing the year before that. We had won Best New Restaurant in America from Bon Appetit magazine. That was another thing where like, we didn't have a PR team. We didn't do any marketing. That was them finding us and being like, this is the best new restaurant that opened in America. And our minds were just blown that it happened. And I don't know. I don't really feel like it changed me per se. Like, we didn't change what we were doing. We didn't change the restaurant. We were just like, we're obviously on the right track here. Like, let's just keep doing the same things. So when I decided to leave DC, it was actually kind of funny. We had just opened Little Pearl. And when we opened Rose's Luxury, I definitely had some like pre-opening responsibilities. I was like the end game, like project manager. The last like 3 weeks I was running around with the general contractor, like doing punch list stuff and like getting it all done. So I knew where every nail, screw, wire was in that building. Then when we opened Pineapple and Pearls, the second restaurant that we opened that actually got 2 Michelin stars, I designed the entire kitchen there. I worked one-on-one with a kitchen designer. I had a budget to hire staff and all that stuff. We hired the head chef, and then I just pushed everything off. I didn't want to do the food there, so I kind of just helped with like everything behind the scenes to get that restaurant open. And then with Little Pearl, I was given a budget and 100% control over pretty much everything outside of the design of the restaurant. So when it came to purchasing kitchen equipment, layout of the restaurant, like all those things, I did almost all of it. And after we opened Little Pearl, I woke up in the middle of the night, like literally 2 a.m, and shook my wife awake. And I was like, I think I'm ready to open my own restaurant. Like I literally I've opened 3 restaurants in 4 years now that are successes. And I just did this last one all on my own. Like, I think I'm ready. I don't think I want to do it in Washington, D.C. So I think we're moving. And she's like, can we wait until the morning to have this conversation? And
she's like, are you dreaming? Are you sleep talking right now?
No, I mean, some of your best thinking happens when you're asleep.
Yeah.
Like, I just woke up with a feeling where I was like, I'm unfulfilled. I'm doing all this work for other people. I have a theory that opening a restaurant takes at least a year off your life. So I've opened 9 restaurants now. So I'm like, if I'm going to open any more restaurants, like it's going to be my own and I'm going to do it my way. And I knew that I didn't want it to be in DC. So I pretty much immediately started looking in Chicago and in Columbus. Those are the 2 places that we were targeting. And I found a few places in both that I thought were viable. And ultimately, my wife put her thumb pretty heavily on the scale for Columbus. So that's where we ended up. But it's kind of as simple as it was. Like one day I just was like, all right, I'm ready to do my own thing.
Your gut always tells you. And it was kismet for you guys to come back to Columbus. It really was. Again, you have family here and you, again, Chicago's amazing. I will always be a Chicagoan in my heart and love the food scene, but it's crowded. And you had this moment too, where you could come to Columbus and say, we can change things. This is not a cow town anymore. This is, this is growing. This is one of the largest growing metro areas in the country. What can we do to make it better? So let's chat through each of your venues. They all bring something so special and different. So we've got Chapman's Eat Market. We have Ginger Rabbit Jazz Club. And you had the previous Hireth, now coming soon, Metsi's. So who did you start with and how did they build into each other?
Yeah. So I always knew that I wanted to do multiple ideas here, and I definitely wanted to have a bar. That's where we started. And actually, I was looking at a different project that was in the brewery district that had 2 or 3 venues all in the same thing that would all have come online like within a year or 2 of each other. And that's what I was kind of signed on to do, was multiple restaurants in this one area.
Yeah.
That project got pretty delayed right around the time that I got to Columbus. And then I found the building that became Chapman's Eat Market. And that kind of started off as something that we had considered as like a temporary situation, that we were going to open like almost like a pop-up restaurant there. And I couldn't figure it out. And my wife, Bronwyn, was the one who one day we were doing a walk through the space and she was like, what if we just did it like all the way, like turned it into our restaurant? We didn't do this temporarily, but like this was like an actual thing. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I guess I could see it. Like we'd have to redo a bunch of stuff. And she immediately was like, all right, I think we should paint the walls. I think we should do this. We have a friend who's a designer. Let's FaceTime him and see what he thinks. And like he saw it and he was like, this is great. Let's start. So that's really where it started. And with my experience at Rose's Luxury, I really wanted to open something that felt like a neighborhood place. There's a lot of parallels to what Chapman's building is and what Rose's building was. So that really moved kind of quickly. We went from kind of considering it to signing the lease, which, funny enough, was 2 weeks before the pandemic started. So
you were like, almost every person I've had on this podcast so far is like, I started something weeks before March 2020.
Yeah, it was, I think that we signed the lease, if I'm not mistaken, I think we signed it on like March 6th or something like that. And I'll never forget, we did a pop-up dinner at the Locks Bagel Shop, and we were supposed to do, I think, 2 or 3 in consecutive weeks. And it was in between the first week and the second week. was when the pandemic started. And I had bought like 8 cases of wine to do the whole run. And then the pandemic started. I just had all this wine in our apartment. I'm like, well, I guess we're drinking good for the next however long. And yeah, my wife's birthday is on April 17th. And I'll never forget, we were doing paint swatches that day in the restaurant. And it was before everything, like before we really knew. And that was the day that Governor DeWine like really shut everything down. And we were just like, oh God, like I was literally just doing like paint swatches. And I got the pop up on my phone that was just like, curfew, like all these things. I'm just like, oh, we're supposed to be opening a restaurant? Like, whoa, what? So yeah, that was Chapman's. But anyway,
it's such a success now. Like it came through.
We opened in a very interesting time, and our investor really had our back through the beginning because we lost a ton of money right when we opened because we couldn't do anything except for sell to go food. And then when the restrictions got lifted in 2021, we became like a restaurant. And out of the blue, we won top 50 restaurants in America from New York Times, which we had no idea that was happening. We never solicited them to come in. They never told me that they were in. I got a random email from their editor being like, we're fact checking something for a story we're writing. Did you open at this time? Is this how to spell your last name? And that's it. So I thought that was going to be like a 24 hours in Columbus, like mention us as a thing to do, and it ended up being the top 50. And yeah, that really blew my mind. Right at that point was when we were considering more spots, and I'd been talking to the wood company for a little while here in Short North about a bar space that they had that is underneath another restaurant that used to be a board game bar called Kingmakers, and it looks super cool. And I knew that I wanted to do a bar there. I knew that I wanted to be gin focused, and we were kind of kicking around the idea of what if we had live entertainment, and we eventually settled on jazz. And I didn't want to hire a chef for that restaurant. I didn't want to like have a big food program. So it was really going to be about the drinks. And then we would have just like a few little snacky offerings. And that was the easiest opening that I've ever done. It just was incredible. And it still to this day is my favorite place that I've ever opened. And I don't work there that often. I mostly go to like actually enjoy what we do. It's just a well-oiled machine. It runs itself. The entertainment's incredible. And I could totally see franchising that to multiple places if we ever have the bandwidth to actually do it. And then at the same time, we were building what was Here Eighth, which is a very large, it's about 6,000 square feet, wood-fired restaurant here in the Short North. And we got that open in 2023. And unfortunately, that restaurant didn't work for a whole host of different reasons. And we decided to pivot to make it an event space. And it did really well from June of last year until about December of this year. We were really picking up steam with events and all that stuff. And then our landlord came to us and said, how are you feeling about it? And I was like, it's doing well. And they were like, listen, we really want this to be a restaurant space. We built it out to be a restaurant space, and we've got a lot of residential stuff, and we just want the Short North to be special. And if you'd be willing to entertain the conversation, we want to renovate it with you back into a restaurant. And I was like, look, I've opened 3 restaurants in 4 years. Like, I don't know if I want to do another one. And as we started spinning the wheels of what it would take and the mistakes that we might have made in the original design, it became really clear that we had a really cool concept and a really cool grasp of what we had to do with the space to renovate it into something that would work. And before I knew it, we were just kind of going. So we chose a name for it. As you mentioned, Metsi's Wood-Fired Italian is we settled on. My father is from New York, and when we got pregnant with our son, that was my parents' first grandchild. So I asked my dad what he wanted his grandfather name to be, and he said Metsi. So thought that was a really cool concept I've never named any of the restaurants after myself. Chapman's is my wife's family name. Ginger Rabbit, it has nothing to do with me. It's actually an inside joke with our team that turned into a really cool idea. So Metsi's is really the first name that I'm taking from my side of the family.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. I think the changes that we're making to the physical space are the correct things. I think we're setting ourselves up for the best chance of success that we can. I think it's going to be a really special restaurant. And I think that we've figured out what didn't work at Here Eighth and why it didn't work. And hopefully we're giving ourselves the absolute best chance of success. As I'm sure everybody knows, restaurants have no guarantee of success for any period of time. So it's a scary time to own a restaurant. We can talk about that separately. But yeah, opening right now feels very similar to opening Chapman's in the middle of the pandemic. So we'll see how it goes. But I think we're giving yourself the best chance to make a go at this.
I agree. And Again, congratulations. Can't wait. I think it's so sweet how you named it after your dad for your son, essentially, as well. And
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. So, when you first mentioned to me wood fired Italian, I said, oh, who doesn't love a wood fired pizza? And you said, no pizza. So, tell us a little bit more about that decision because I think it's really interesting. And if you did a pizza one day, I would just be there all the time. Not there, but at another pizza concept, I should say.
It's definitely high up on my wish list of concepts to do in this world. And I know exactly what type of pizza I want to do and everything. Unfortunately, the type of pizza that I want to do is one at a time in a coal fired oven. And Metsi's is about 100 seats. So if we were doing pizza, we'd be screwed. So it's a wood fired hearth. And I think that's something that we need to do an awareness campaign of like what kind of wood fired cuisine it is. So it's not a covered pizza oven like people sometimes think of. It's a wide open concrete and brick hearth that you build the fires vertically and then filter the coals to where you want them to go. And we have a few different grill situations that are like raise and lower grills. And we have some yakitori style cooking apparatuses where it's like kind of sunk into the bed of the hearth. And then we have a smoker that looks a little bit like an oven, but not like a domed oven. So there's a lot of different kinds of like cooking apparatuses on the wood fired hearth, but I find it interesting that people really want to differentiate the fuel that you cook with because for thousands of years, it was only wood fire. There was no such thing as cooking over propane. So it is funny to me that there's no differentiation for a propane kitchen, but for some reason, if your kitchen's wood fired, then it's like very special. But this cuisine is an ancient cuisine for and some purposes. And to that end, it was cooked over wood fire for many, many, many hundreds of years. So the things that we're doing are kind of simple throwbacks to what these recipes originally were. We're using smoke to our advantage. We're using the heat of the fire to get that hard sear on things, but we don't want people to walk out smelling like a campfire. This is a delicate and homey style of cuisine that we're just trying to utilize the fire to give that little like je ne sais quoi of flavor that is traditional and maybe something a little heart and soul that some other restaurants might be lacking with that cuisine.
This is going to be so cool. And the way you described that right now, it made me think all of your concepts to date feel similar to that. You pay a lot of respect to history and tradition and the fact that, you know, it's 2025. You can go back in time to a jazz lounge. You walk into Chapman's, and to paint the picture for folks, it's this gorgeous painting on the wall as well as incredible like wallpaper. And again, this could live in almost any era, but there's a way about your branding and your food itself that took tradition, history, and something special and makes it modern. And essentially, it's timeless then. If I wanted to be less wordy, it's timeless.
That's like a big buzzword for me is like an institution, a feeling that you could be in any era. And there's a lot of different ways to achieve that. And I think that understanding history and respecting the history of not just the place and time that you're in, but the food that you're trying to work with and to express yourself with is really important. And a few points on that is number one, the building that Chapman's is in is actually a pretty famous building that housed the original Max and Irma's. But even before that, it was a continuous restaurant for, I believe, 60 years before Max and Irma's even opened. So this goes back to like the late 1800s, early 1900s that it's been a continuous restaurant. So we're taking over a space that has a ton of history in Columbus. It's a very old building, and we didn't want to like renovate the charm out of it or the history out of it. So we really wanted to work with the bones that we had and just essentially slap a coat of paint and wallpaper and make it feel timeless and make it feel really special. And then the menu there, I am and have been like sick of my own food for quite a while. And the thing that I realized towards the end of my run at Rose's was I gained much more enjoyment from talking to the cooks about food, having very open conversations about where things come from, why things are cool, how to connect the dots. And that kind of morphed a little bit more into me trying to get ideas out of their heads, being like, what's something your mom cooked you when you were a kid and why is that important to you? And being like, how do we turn that into a Michelin star dish? Something that's like living up here as a core memory for you. How do I get it out of your head onto a plate in a way that we're proud of? And I was like, if I open Chapman's with that ethos in mind, then the menu will be a reflection of the kitchen and not a reflection of me trying to do something. So if you look at Chapman's menu, it's constantly evolving. It evolves with our team, but we have Middle Eastern dishes, we have Southeast Asian dishes, we have Japanese dishes, we have American Southern dishes, we have Mexican dishes, we have North Atlantic dishes, we have Midwestern dishes, and it's all based on our travels, being inspired by things and being like, I really want to share this with the Columbus public based on where we grew up, who we are, who individuals are, what the culture is, things that they want to share with our guests. And it's my job to craft it into, like you said, something that feels modern, but is steeped in history and stories and all these things. And getting back to what I'm not good at, I'm good at telling these stories on like this podcast. I need to be able to tell these stories better through like our social media. Cause I think if people understood that each dish has like a human being and a story attached to it, then I think that it would be a little bit easier to wrap your head around what it is that we're trying to do. And then at Ginger Rabbit, you know, everyone calls it a speakeasy. And that drives me crazy a little bit because if people knew what speakeasies were like raucous sex alcohol parties. It wasn't people calmly sitting down drinking gin martinis and watching jazz. It was people doing illegal shit and having a big old party. And like speakeasy vibes, like fine. Like period centric, like bringing you back to the 1920s aesthetic, cool. It is not a speakeasy. We're not throwing that kind of party every night. We're doing something really fun. But the more that you get into jazz and the history of jazz, the more you realize that like a lot of what we talked about, peasant food and stuff like that, it's all steeped in a lot of really nasty history. Jazz is inextricably tied to the slave trade, to the founding of the Americas, to the movement of people through force and musical modes that came out of that. And I think it's a really important thing to tell those stories honestly and to celebrate where this creativity and where this love comes from. And a lot of that is out of desperation and out of making the best of what you have. And I feel like that's part of why I love Ginger Rabbit so much and why I love talking about the food, the music, and where like history and culture and you know, just all the stuff that needs to come together to make this and talk about it in a really open and honest way is important. And then, you know, when you start talking about Metsi's, the wood-fired Italian, like I'm not Italian, so I don't feel comfortable being like we're doing food from Abruzzo or something like that. My whole family grew up in the mid-Atlantic and there's a lot of Italian American culture there. So I don't want to necessarily call this like an Italian restaurant. I kind of want to call it like a metropolitan Italian restaurant where it's like the food that I grew up with, the food that I'm inspired by, that like, yes, it's Italian, but it's definitely a little bit like American Italian. And it's just comfort food, like things that really speak to us in a way where this is what we want to eat and what we want to cook kind of stuff. So each restaurant's definitely a little bit different, but as my old boss used to say, it's the same soul, different clothes. So I feel like each restaurant's wearing a different outfit, but it's all coming from like a really true place of wanting to learn and understand and share with people what it is that we're trying to say through these restaurants.
That is really special. And I think you did a great job on summarizing that. And it makes so much sense. And thank you for doing that work, for being honest, for telling stories, for talking about history, and for doing it in a way that shows a lot of love and care and connects us all. You know, at the end of the day, we all sit down at the table, or we sit down, let's say, for a gin martini, and we want to be grateful. We want to have gratitude for what we have and how far we've come and what we can keep doing. And that's actually a little bit of a segue for another really special venue that you actually work with in town. So you originally essentially came on as a chef consultant for Freedom a la carte. So Freedom a la carte, for folks who don't know, is a beautiful cafe and catering service here out of Columbus. Not only is it delicious, it's this bright, beautiful space when you go in, but it actually helps support survivors of human trafficking through workforce programming and other resources. And again, all proceeds and donations go back to this. And it's another one of those tough topics, like you mentioned, jazz's connection to slavery, that this is happening in front of us all the time, in every city, in every locale. and it's not talked about that much. So I'd love to hear more. What has inspired you to work with Freedom, what that work has looked like, and also a very special event that's coming up this summer.
Yeah, it started as nepotism, to be honest. My stepmother-in-law, my wife's stepmother, is the CEO, and I've been donating dinners to Freedom a la carte, to the Eat Up event, which we can talk about in a second, for, about 9 years in a row now, even before I lived in Columbus. So it was one of those things where I was donating the dinners, but I didn't really know what it was for. Just my mother-in-law asked me to do it, and I said yes. And then once a year, I would drive to Columbus and cook a meal for people, and it was super fun. And I didn't really know what it was all about. Right before we moved to Columbus, Paula, my mother-in-law, called me and said, "Hey, our chef just put in our notice. Do you have anyone that you know in Columbus who might be interested in taking over as the head chef?" And I was like, I haven't even lived there yet. I don't know anyone. And I was like, but I'm gainfully unemployed when I get there. I was like, so if you want me to hold down the fort while we look for a new head chef, I'm happy to do it. And she was kind of blown away with the offer. And I was like, what? It's catering. Like, this should be fine. Like, I can do this for a little bit. And it was the most eye-opening experience of my entire life. Working with the survivors one-on-one, a lot of them were really standoffish when I started, because pretty much every relationship that most of them had with a male to that point had been bad, to say the least. So it was an extra challenge for me to come in and be a good role model. So, it became really clear to me really fast that it wasn't about the food there. I mean, we had to put out really good food, but I'm used to being in kitchens where everyone knows what they're doing. And I was having to show people how to hold a knife and going over the same recipe that we'd done a few days in a row. And I was never like a yeller, screamer, throw pans kind of chef at all, but I definitely didn't have a high tolerance for patience. And the cool thing about working at Freedom a la carte was it really taught me infinite patience, because it taught me that there are much bigger forces in this world than making a salad or a sandwich, and that the ability of these women to come into work every day and put their heavy burden of stuff to the side to work and do it happily and do it as a team was really, really inspiring. So after about 6 months, we ended up hiring Chef Lori, and she's incredible. And there was no way that I was going to just walk away from it, because I was super, super grateful that I got to be a part of it. So this year they asked me if I would head up the culinary portion of the Eat Up event that we're doing in July. In the past few years, it hasn't been a whole sit-down dinner. It's been more of a grazing situation. This year, they want to go back to it being a sit-down dinner. So they asked me if I could assemble a group of chefs to do it. So I'm bringing in 4 of my really closest chef friends who I respect very much, who I want to be a part of this. And we're doing a 5-course tasting menu for this Eat Up event for 400 people. That'll be a challenge, but also something that means a lot. And, we could end up raising upwards of $50,000, $100,000 for Eat Up for this. So it's 100% worth it. And we're still going to auction off the dinner that I always auction off every year. And hopefully it can go for more money than normal this year, because I'll actually be there on site cooking. But yeah, I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to work with Freedom. And we've done other stuff behind the scenes that benefits them too. I have a pretty delicate relationship with outwardly talking about the things that we do. I don't want to virtue signal is a big thing of mine, but if it benefits Freedom for me to talk about what we do for Freedom, then I'm happy to do it, because I think more people need to know about it, and more people need to make it their daily cafe, and more people need to use it for their office parties. And I know that they stay super busy, but there's always room to get busier. Like you said, this is happening in front of our eyes everywhere in the country, and Freedom can be the mold that everyone else can work off of on an effective and, I don't know, just amazing way to help heal, get people out of situations that they need to get out of.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you for that. I always feel really emotional talking about this, and I'm really grateful to be part of the team who's also helping plan and push out the event this year. So I can't wait to bid on your dinner and have such an amazing night all together. Again, for folks, we learned this with the Freedom team. They had a study done by Stanford recently, and they knew that they were making an impact. But, once you quantify things, it makes a lot of sense to folks, and it's bigger impact to just recognizing what's happening. It's when we help these survivors and they have resources and they can get jobs and they become independent folks, The return to investment on the local economy is 7-1. That is better than most startups ever hope to do. So folks who are in the Columbus area or who are coming in town, you can go to freedomalacarte.org to learn a lot more and to support. So thanks for talking about that. Again, this is just another special moment from moving to Columbus that I had no idea that we could get involved with and be part of something special where you're combining food as well as freedom.
Yeah, thank you for giving us a platform to talk about it, because I'm excited to talk about it whenever I get the chance.
Let's talk about a few other challenging moments before we talk about just having gratitude and thinking about how excited we are for the future and, again, growth and just pushing forward. Because I think that's how success in any terms happens, is that we're always going to have hard moments, whether it's on an individual level, whether it's on a collective level. We're just presented with challenges. So like you mentioned, right now, 2025, it almost feels like there's a restriction on freedom right now. And it really does affect the food, bev, hospitality, and agricultural industries specifically, from the employee standpoint all the way to the ingredient and economic standpoint. So what do you do during tough times? Like you mentioned too, when you had to close down a restaurant, it's hard to say goodbye to a baby. What do you do and how do you encourage your team to suit up, put on your armor, and push through?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I am a very emotional person, and I'm also a very political person. So seeing what's going on right now is hurting on multiple levels. Just a general human, seeing people in this country and just more broadly the world being hurt for what feels like no good gosh darn reason is weighing on me pretty heavily on a day-to-day basis. And then also with our restaurants, I mean, this is people's livelihood, and I feel a lot of responsibility for making sure that their hearts and their wallets are full every day. And yeah, coming to work every day, knowing that people are feeling the same way that I do, and emotionally kind of reeling, and having to somehow be some sort of cheerleader for us getting our shit together is very tough. And our food system has been pretty broken for a long time, and I was really hoping that we're at the point where some people might start coming up with fixes. So that's the challenge. I think that the thing that we can do is remind ourselves of why we come to work every day. And, partially it's to make money, but also partially we all chose this industry because we have an inherent need to make people happy. And if we can be the bright spot in somebody's day coming into our restaurant, or some sense of normalcy, just being able to go out to dinner, I think that that's the thing that we try to wrap our head around, and how I try to stay sane through all this, cracking jokes about it as much as we possibly can. Part of it feels a little hopeless, but then on the other end of it, you just got to hope that people's better nature eventually win out, and that we can make it through however long we need to make it through this and get to the other side of it.
Thank you for sharing. And I think that's what is important, is let's talk about this stuff. I personally try to do a balance of being informed, understanding what's happening, trying to understand my sources that are going to tell me the truth as much as possible, talking about how we're feeling and how it's affecting all of us. And then also reminding myself of the joy in life. And I think that's what your venues bring. They bring a beautiful space for a meal. They bring a good time to sit down and listen to some great music. We all still love these really simple things. And the conversations I've been having on The Perfect Bite, especially about this, is the hope that we all want change. And I think if we continue to vote in the multiple ways we all vote, which includes our wallets, so please go out to eat at your local venues instead of chains constantly. And by supporting folks who believe in the same things that you do, and knowing that they also support great food, I think that's a win-win all around. Let's end even more hopeful before we get to the world's best and hardest question.
Okay.
What are you most proud of? You've had So many amazing moments. How do you want to continue to grow? What do you hope for the future?
The thing that I'm the most proud of is my family, for sure. We were never going to have a kid, and we did. And it's definitely the light of our lives. And it definitely put everything in a lot of a different perspective for me. But I'll be proud to just call myself a good father at the end of the day, and to watch my son grow up and be a good husband. And that's really the thing that I think that I'm the most focused on at this time. As far as professionally, the thing I'm most proud of is I don't even know. I mean, the awards, like I said, they feel random, and, we can run down a laundry list of all the cool shit that's happened to me. But I feel like at the end of the day, the thing that I'm probably the most proud of is the team that we've built and how much they truly care about each other. And yeah, kind of that one team, one dream thing that anytime that any employee tells me this is the best place that they've ever worked, that's what I'm the most proud of.
One team, one dream. I haven't heard that one before, actually.
Oh, really? That's pretty common in our restaurant group. So, yeah.
I think that's perfect. And what's your piece of advice that you want to give someone who wants to get into the culinary space or start something of their own?
My current feelings are don't. But no, realistically, I think that a lot of people are wired the way that I'm wired, where sitting behind a desk doesn't make sense, and doing things with your hands is what you want to do. And like, I can't play music. I've tried. I'm not a musician. I can't paint. I've tried. The art form that I am good at is food. And the thing that I love about it is getting to work with my friends every day and getting to see the smile on people's faces when we get to be a bright spot in their day. So my advice to anybody who wants to get into this industry is that if you're not the type of person who wants to work with your friends and see other people be happy, then you're in it for the wrong reasons, and you might as well find a desk job somewhere, because it's hard work, it's grueling, it wrecks your body, it wrecks your personal life if you don't have people who fully understand what it is that you're going through on a day-to-day basis. And you just really need to be in it for the love of it, and definitely not for any financial reasons. So to me, it's the best industry there is. I love the people in the industry. I love getting to talk about it and all those things. If you're willing to give up all your free time, your health, and all those things, then we'll welcome you with open arms to the industry. So.
You're going to be amongst the greatest folks in the world. I'll tell you that, because it takes heart and it takes grit. And that's truly like what life is.
Yeah.
That's what a full life looks like. That's for sure.
Yeah. And my son hanging out in the restaurants, it's like such a cool thing to me. And he's totally comfortable running behind the bar during service. And he knows that there's like a deference that we have to being in restaurants because he's grown up in them. He's been to Ginger Rabbit so many times that he understands when the band's done with the solo that you're supposed to clap. I love that about him. He plays dinner party at home all the time, where I lay plates out, and he has the bug. He wants to throw a party all the time. And I'll almost guarantee that he ends up in the industry. He's 3 years old and I already know that.
He is so cute. And I love that it's a reflection of your childhood a little bit on the next level, where, like you said, you're like, oh, wow, I didn't know it was unusual to try all these different cuisines and be able to support local restaurants like this. And he's like, yay, welcome to my Ginger Rabbit. Welcome to my Chapman's. Welcome to my Metsi's.
He literally says that when people walk in. He's like, welcome to my restaurant. And I just die. It's the funniest thing. But, you'd think that he would eat and be like the most adventurous eater. He's just like any other kid. It's like chicken nuggies, milk, and mac and cheese. So we still have to do buttered noodles at the restaurants for him and stuff. But he'll get there,
His perfect bite will change too.
Oh, it definitely will. If you asked him now, it would change probably to next week. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's time for yours. So a reminder for folks, this is called the perfect bite, not just a little bit of a perfect bite of the industry, of the folks we talk to, as well as my career to date, but it's also because all of us have our own perfect bite, a recipe, a meal, a memory that we'll always hold on to that's very special to us. So, BJ, what is your perfect bite?
You'd think this would be an easy question for me. It's actually the hardest one that you asked by far. I'm very blessed to have eaten some incredible food in some incredible places. And there's many moments in my life where I've eaten something that literally changed something inside of me, where I'm like, I didn't know that this could exist together. But my answer is probably going to surprise you. It's my grandmother's matzo ball soup. Is something that just has been a mission of mine to recreate for a really long time. And we've done it on the menu at Chapman's multiple times. And it's just one of those dishes that is so perfect that I don't know, just can't imagine not having it in my repertoire for the rest of my life. She passed away when I was about 20 years old, and I inherited all of her recipes, and I inherited all of her mother's recipes. A recipe book written by a European Jewish woman in the 1910s is a freaking wild read. But yeah, I had her matzo ball recipe, and there were unfortunately no measurements and no method on how to do it. It was just the ingredients she put in it. And over the course of time, I figured it out, and it's incredible. And I love sharing it with people because it's my favorite thing in the world.
And it's timeless.
Yeah. And other timeless one. Yeah.
Matzel for matzahs. That's a great one. Thank you.
The key, if anyone wants to know, is whipping the egg whites. That's how to make them light and fluffy.
BJ, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you again for all of your time, your stories, your wisdom here today. Can you please let folks know where to find you? So the different venues in Columbus, as well as your social accounts.
Sure. If you want to find me, I'll be driving between the Short North and German Village every day. No, where Chapman's Eat Market is eatchapmans.com and eatchapmans on Instagram. Ginger Rabbit is gingerrabbitjazz.com or gingerrabbitjazz on Instagram. And then Metsi's will be metsi'sitalian.com and eat@Metsi's on Instagram.
Fantastic. Thank you again, BJ, and everyone. This was BJ Lieberman's Perfect.
Thanks for tuning in to The Perfect Bite today. You can listen to future episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Thanks in advance for subscribing, rating, and reviewing. You can follow The Perfect Bite on social media @PerfectBitePod. Now go get something good to eat.